Yeah, hi, thanks. So I made this toy, and I'm actually pretty glad to be here. And I probably the first thing I want to say is I'm probably the dumbest person in this room, because I come to this meetup sometimes, and most of the time, most of the things that the speakers speak about, I don't actually understand. I'm a designer by training. I barely know any programming, and my grasp of Ohm's law is just very tenuous, and so everybody here in terms of hardware and software is actually smarter than me. But I managed to learn how to make a toy, and last month, as Ken spoke about, I was in a conference where I was also the dumbest person out of 2,000 people in the conference. Probably the least educated person there, and the least famous person there, and that was a TED talk. According to the TEDx Singapore guy, I'm like the first Singapore citizen to actually talk on the main stage at TED. But I don't know. My friend actually asked me whether I was famous. No, I actually had an opportunity to be very near famous people, so I'm not actually famous. And yeah, the funny thing is that I know barely anything about technology, and I was on stage giving pretty much a technical or technology presentation, and which was my toy. So my strength does not obviously lie in hardware and software. I'm a designer by training. I was in advertising, so my strength actually lies in marketing and design. So I had to go and think about how do I get my product known to the world, and to a point where people would invite me to prestigious events like this, right? And how I went about it was to start with a marketing idea, and not just any basic marketing idea. I had a pretty ambitious marketing idea. It had to be ambitious because I have no money. I have no money, so I don't have lots of money to spend on advertising campaigns. So my product itself has to attract the attention of people. My main idea was when people see this YouTube video, it will interest them, and apparently it worked, right? I put this video up. The content director from TED, after a couple of weeks, sent me an email saying, "Would you like to speak at TED?" Which is, I said yes without knowing what I was getting myself into, right? I think one of the things that I have encountered, because I work in an engineering company and I've always been a designer for over 10 years. One of the things I realize when I meet especially young designers and young engineers is that they do not think that marketing and finance has got anything to do with their job, right? They kind of think, I do a design, I throw it to an engineer, nothing to do with me anymore, right? And the engineer has got to solve all those problems, right? I mean, engineers here will know designers that behave in that way. And one of the things about having always been in small companies, I realized that issues like marketing, issues like finance, how does this thing going to make money? How is this thing going to grab attention? Has to be built in from the design at the start of conception of the idea. So which is why, from my experience with a couple of my previous businesses, I knew I had to approach it this way. Like I said, because I had no money, I have only YouTube on my side. I didn't spend a single cent getting TED to be aware of me. So I created this is a simplified version of it, but I came up with a marketing plan first, and the idea was I want to get people to look at my YouTube video, and so I had to think about, okay, how I want to make a toy, and I want people to see the toy and be impressed, right? Like what you guys saw on the video. So my first thing was, okay, this toy has to be big, right? I want to make something big, and at that point, I wanted 3D printed. This was about 3 years ago, and as you guys are probably very familiar, 3 years ago, when everybody was doing 3D printing, it was always something small, one single color, doesn't really move, usually some Yoda's head or some Eiffel Tower or something like that, right? You're all very familiar with when the desktop 3D printers started coming around. So at that point I decided at some point in the future someone is going to make something big with a home or a small desktop 3D printer, and at that point I was like thinking, okay, if I'm going to do this, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy, that first guy to make something really huge. So my toy, I'm sorry, I couldn't bring it up. It is about 50 cm tall, so it's about yay big, right? And of course, the next thing is I want it to look good. I went to art school. I'm not too, making it look good is something that I'm quite confident I'll be able to do, right? And then there's the last part is that it has to move around and have lots of moving parts. And that was the part like, I have zero idea, right? I know the Arduino exists and I know a few of these things exist in the world, but I had no idea. I had no programming knowledge. I have no electronics knowledge whatsoever. And when I went into this, but I decided to go and try this anyway. Right. So I came up with, so I had to think about how am I going to start designing this thing. And the usual design strategy that people use is that they have this, I'll call this visionary design, right? So usually somebody comes out with an idea, and the next thing is they can kind of picture what they want in the end, right? Usually really smart people, they come up with an idea, they know what they want in the end. And when you know what you want in the end, you kind of are able to semi-plot a roadmap from your idea to how you envision your finished product to look like. I mean, a success or failure is how the finished product will look like, but you can kind of plot that kind of a roadmap. And along the way, you can find maybe like-minded collaborators, suitable technology, and while there may be some deviation from your actual vision of your roadmap, most people who come out with good ideas and are able to get the right elements into it will have the end product kind of similar to how they've envisioned it, right? This is the visionary way that a designer will go about it. And of course, like I said, whether the product sells or not depends on whether his vision was right in the first place. But my problem was that I completely didn't have a clue about a very component part about what I wanted to do. How do I get my thing to move? So I couldn't create a roadmap. And as a result, I couldn't have an end goal. I couldn't visualize how my end point is going to be like. So I had to, in hindsight, I call this kind of an emergent design strategy, right? I don't even know how my end point is going to look like. So just to give you an example of how unsure I was at that stage, what I did was kind of like a walking tank thing, right? My initial idea was actually something that flies, like an airship or something like that. Of course, very quickly I realized that, I'm not going to be able to make anything fly, right? So I didn't even know what my endpoint was when I started. And so I had to kind of stumble along the way. And because I didn't know my endpoint, a few things I couldn't have a roadmap, right? I also couldn't have a timeline. And without a roadmap and a timeline, you can kiss goodbye collaborators, right? Because I can't convince anybody, hey, I got a great idea, but I don't know what it's like. Would you like to work with me for the next 18 months making no money, right? I couldn't get collaboration, so I pretty much had to do and learn everything by myself. And of course, along the way, I stumbled on the technologies and the different type of technologies, and my path, because of the lack of roadmap, eventually got me somewhere, but it wasn't what I envisioned at the start. And I'll give you one example. I don't have a lot of time, but I'll give you one example of how my idea, as a designer, how my idea was actually influenced by physics and reality and the tools I had around me. So I realized that I wanted something that, I couldn't get something to fly, right? So I could get something to walk. So the first thing I did was I bought a Haxi from off Kickstarter, right? So I'm sure that some of you guys are familiar with that. So I bought one, $250. I bought one, and I played around with it. And I played around with it, reading the forums and reading what people are doing with it. And the next thing, of course, I realized that, hey, there's this thing called the Links Motion SSC 32, which is a 32 servo controller, right? So I also bought this, and this is so with this I realized one thing. Hey, actually I can use my Arduino to use serial code to send serial messages to this, and it has like a built-in 2 degree of freedom hexapod leg thing. It's like, hey, cool. At least I can start to think about building stuff. So this together with Arduino Uno was my basis of the brain of my thing. Then I started going to print some legs. Right, really basic legs, right, and I made this nice, thin, sleek, long legs. Okay, not very nice looking, but this was like a real early prototype. But it completely failed because of the length of the legs, right? It was putting up too much pressure on the servos. It just couldn't bear the weight of everything because of the long legs. So I next thing is that if I can't have long legs, I can't have thin legs, I have to have short legs. So I realized I have to have a broad body and short legs. Right? So I made short legs. Okay, the short legs work. Right, so I managed to get my short legs to work, and it was only when I managed to get my legs to work that I could have that this particular early product came about. Because if you think about how, if you look at my endpoint of my toy, I did not have the endpoint when I started. I only had the endpoint once I had those legs walking, and I said, hey, that looks like a turtle, right? It's walking kind of silly and clumsily, right? I could have wanted to make a robot that looks like it can move very fast and is very slick and very futuristic, but because of how silly and slow and kind of dumpy that those little fat legs look like, the shape of the body, which is, in a way, in hindsight, is one of the most distinctive feature of the toy, came out of the restrictions that I was having to work under. So I mean, as a designer, I had to kind of work with what I was getting. I couldn't impose my design philosophy. Hey, it has to be slick, and the CG has to be kind of in this funny place. Right? I had to work with real life CG that is low and close to the ground. So how do you use a kind of emergent way of working, where I don't even know where my endpoint is when I started, right? And then still am able to put 18 months of all my free time into it. The thing about it is that I kept referring back to my initial marketing plan, right? So with this, I know I can build it big because I made a bigger body with shorter legs, and so as a result, it works as a big product. So I know I can build big, and because of the center of gravity, I know I can then build upwards. So instead of building long, I will build tall. It can still be big. It just has to be tall, right? So I was hitting my checklist big. Now I got it moving around, and once I started figuring out how to get the servos to work the way I wanted to, I can get all the other things going, like all the guns and all the other things that's gonna be servo activated, right? So I figured out how to get the parts moving. I was checking that list, and then finally I took the time to do the things that I knew how to do, which was to make it look pretty. So yeah, so I'm thinking that, I mean, for me it's very fortunate because I'm coming from a non-tech background, and I'm able to kind of leverage tech a little bit to get what I wanted. But part of it, of course, is kind of a surrendering a design kind of dictatorship to the reality of the tools that I have to work with. And but by sticking to my core marketing plan, I managed to get I managed to get my toy featured on lots of different websites, and eventually got interested to see what it is, right? Yeah, so thank you for I hope that for those guys out there who are not tech savvy, it it's still possible to leverage on a little bit of tech and do something interesting. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Which program did you use to design?
SolidWorks. Yeah. Okay, one of the things about this is that, there was 435 3D printed parts. And because I needed to be able to test on home 3D printers, right? So all the parts are actually small enough to fit in a home 3D printer. So I had lots of parts, and because of that, every screw hole had to align. And when you want, and my surfaces are all curved. Right? I was stupid enough not to build a square thing. Like I should have been. If I was smart, I would build a square thing where it's a lot easier to control. But I was so stupid, I built a round thing. So all the curves had to be perfect, and all the screw holes had to align. And so I could only use a professional software to do it. But I work in an engineering company, so I managed to have access to it. Any?
How much do you think, including your time?
Yes.
Do you think the toy would cost?
When I was there, actually, one of the tech YouTubers make a video of my toy. I don't know whether you guys know Linus Tech Tips. I actually visited when I was in Vancouver. I visited him because they were in Vancouver as well, and they did a feature, and based on his calculation, he calculated about 7,000 USD lah. So, but and that's kind of like minimum wage for the time I actually put in lah. So in a lot of ways, I'm not envisioning this as a money making. This is partly I mean, obviously I'm not going to make. I don't know if anyone wants to part 7,000 USD. That's fine with me. But it's not an expectation that I have.
Or in hindsight, like now with your skill set, like you will redo it. Not that you will redo it, but then what things do you do?
I think the first thing I would ditch is 3D printing. Because I think even now, 3 years later, the prices haven't gotten to a point where it is, well, because I will tell you right now why a large chunk of that, I paid over about 3,000 USD to Hackware for that, right? So a large chunk of that $7,000 is given to Hackware. So 3D printing prices are still not quite there for high fidelity and yada yada yada. So if I was to do it all over again, which I would probably do it all over again, it would probably be resin casting or soft vinyl casting or something like that, which is instead of 3D printing.
You mentioned that you spend $3,000 on Hackware.
Yeah.
Do you consider to use a home FDM printer?
Yeah.
And then not use the screw, but use chemical welding?
Yeah, I think over the course of that 3 years, right now, like I see my friends with the Ultimator 2 coming out with really good prints at 0.0. And I think 3 years ago, the home 3D printers were still not quite there yet. I think the Replicator 2 X2 just about came out, and so I think if I was answering that question this year, I would say maybe FDM, I can do some of the stuff with FDM. But I think 3 years ago I couldn't. I think the home 3D printers could.
I think it's that.
Yeah.
And you probably didn't anticipate spending $3,000.
I kind of.
Up on you over time.
I can't say that I didn't anticipate spending $3,000. I expected, because I kind of know how much, if I was to print with object printers in Singapore, how much it would cost me. I had a pretty good grasp of the cost. I wasn't building it for sale, and therefore I was thinking more like a prototyping cost or a business cost. So in that sense, $3,000 is fine for me to build one. To make a point and to prove, to complete a hobby project. But for me to turn it into a product, it would not be an approach I would take. Yeah, that's the.
Okay, so if there's a little time for
I'll be hanging around.
So, if any more questions, right, you approach him after the everything. So now we have the next speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah.